Hi everybody, my name is Jeremy Siskind. I'm the author of books, so many books. I'm not going to tell you their names. You can read them. You can learn all about them at jeremysiskind.com/shop. Okay, I'm kind of excited about today's video because I'm going to share something with you that it took me 15 years to figure out, and I feel really dumb, but I think that I've made good progress, and I hope that I can prevent you from making the same mistakes and living in the same kind of ignorance that I've lived in. So the question here is about so what voicings, or really any kind of modal voicing. And let's start by talking about so what voicings a little bit. But the question is going to be, how can we harmonize simple melodies using so what or other kinds of voicings and really make it sound great? Okay. So first of all, I'm going to slow down. What is a so what voicing? Well, a so what voicing is a modal voicing, meaning that it's not attached to any specific chord tones, but it's a set of intervals that we can move throughout the mode. So let's start in our friendly D Dorian. And a so what voicing is made up of 4 notes organized in fourths. So I'm just starting from D, because we're in D Dorian, and then a third on top. And modal voicings are going to stay completely within that mode. So here's D Dorian completely, we're going to use all white keys. Notice here, everything is a perfect fourth, and then it's a major third from F to A on top. Now, we can move this shape anywhere in this D Dorian mode. So if we move it with E on bottom, we actually get the same exact set of intervals. All perfect fourths, and a third on top. Also, these first two, you're probably familiar with from the tune, and they have this very open sound because of all those perfect intervals. Now, as we move it to F, we're going to hear a very, very different sounding voicing. Much pointier, right? And that's mostly because of this minor ninth here, but also this tritone here. Notice on top it's a minor third rather than a major third. And we can keep going, and each one, for the most part, is going to have a slightly different set of intervals. And this is great for tunes like So What, because if we're worrying about staying around the 7th and the 3rd of a chord, we're not going to create enough motion, enough excitement, if we're just kind of comping on the same voicing again and again. Instead, using these modal voicings, what we can do is we can move around melodically, not just with these two, but see that they're all usable, right? We said this one was ugly, but in context, we can use it so long as we're conscious about which ones sound more relaxed or resolved and which ones sound more tense or unresolved, okay? So that brings us to this question of, let's say we want to harmonize a melody using something like so what voicings, and I'll give this to students as an assignment to practice so what voicings. So Autumn Leaves, of course, one of the standard jazz melodies, a pretty nice simple one. And yet, harmonizing it with so what voicings really is anything but simple. Dun dun dun. Okay. So in these first 4 measures, we're in the key center of G major, pretty clearly, in my opinion. Okay, we got a 2. Whoa! I dropped my pen. How embarrassing. Am I going to take the time to edit that out? I am not. Okay, so we've got a pretty clear 2, 5, 1, 4 progression in the key of G major. And so what we can do is we can harmonize below each of these melody notes using keys from the G major key signature. So, for instance, there we go. All right, so I'm using that F sharp and all other white keys. That's right. That's really fulfilling the assignment, but there's one part that I don't like about it, and that's a really ugly place to rest. And not only that, but it doesn't really outline, and A minor chord very well, which is supposedly the chord that we're on right there. Right, so technically, yes, this is absolutely the correct so what voicing to harmonize below a C in this case, but I wouldn't use it. So what can we do instead? Well, for me, when I come up against this kind of a difficulty, I choose a different kind of modal voicings. And for me, it's usually going to be something from the pentatonic voicing playbook. And pentatonic voicings and so what voicings are very interrelated because pentatonic voicings also have 5 notes all arranged in fourths except for 1/3. So for instance, right, pentatonic voicings are made out of the pentatonic scale. Here's a C major pentatonic voicing, 1/3, 4 notes in fourths. Getting it? The next one has 1/3, 4 notes in fourths, but the third's in a different spot. This one, the third is actually on the outside. It's actually kind of a quarto voicing. Here again, third, everything else is arranged in fourths, and then this last one is actually exactly like a so what voicing. So if I'm gonna harmonize this autumn leaves, instead of doing this, I'm gonna probably replace it with a pentatonic voicing. Using the A minor or C major pentatonic scale, those are the same set of notes. Okay, so, right, so what was this? Pentatonic is this. And same thing probably for that harmonizing, and I'll show you the melody again, harmonizing that G. That's pretty ugly, so maybe I'll make it a pentatonic voicing. Much nicer. Right, here's also what? Here's pentatonic. Doesn't really lose much, it loses a little bit of grit. And then that second part I have no problem with. I think it actually outlines G major pretty well. Now, here is where things get really interesting. Which is as we get into this E minor key center. Right now we're not in G major anymore, we're doing a 2-5-1 in E minor. And in general, like outside of this context, when I'm in a minor key, I'm thinking about the harmonic minor scale. So I might think about E harmonic minor. Now, unfortunately, this brings up kind of a problem, which is that harmonic minor so what voicing sound pretty ugly. I'm not gonna lie to you. There's not many that are very usable. So there's the notes of your harmonic minor scale. Okay, it's kind of weird. This doesn't look like a so what voicing, but it's because we have a D sharp. None of them, in my opinion, actually sound like a place that I would want to rest. And they all are kind of ugly. So that's really actually quite a big problem. So I could harmonize this using the harmonic minor scale. What would it be? And then something... maybe something like that. We don't have a C sharp in the harmonic minor scale, so that makes it interesting. Speaking of which, okay, so that doesn't work. Next solution might be using the melodic minor scale. Right? We do have a C sharp in here. So we could try using the melodic minor. That's going to sound a little bit better, slightly nicer intervals. Ugliness. And you know, if we go to that G on top, that's our voicing with a G on top. I'll show you. Right, it just doesn't really work that well. So we're 0 for 2. Not impossible to use those scales, but it doesn't really sound great. So here's what I think one should do in this situation. Is that you actually want to choose major modes over this minor 2-5-1. Or sorry, I should say modes of the major scale over this 2-5-1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use B Phrygian. And this is what we would use, right? First of all, this is the same as F sharp Locrian. And so I'm thinking about this whole area as a B7 sus flat 9. This has the distinct disadvantage that we're missing the leading tone. But it has the advantage that we're going to get a nicer set of intervals. So B Phrygian happens to be the same as, say it with me, G major, right? Now, as I get to that D sharp, I'm of course going to have to put that D sharp on top of the voicing. It's the melody. So I'm going to have the bottom of the voicing be in the Phrygian mode, and that top part will get that leading tone, that D sharp. So now, this actually does not solve one of our biggest problems, which is that this is still pretty ugly. So again, what am I going to do when it's ugly? I'm going to replace it. I'm going to replace it with a pentatonic voicing, which happens to be chordal again because it's got that third on top. All right. Well, so what's important here is that this is also how I would actually think about comping. And I guess I forgot to mention here, I would use E Dorian. So the great thing is that for 6 out of these 8 measures, you can comp with the G major scale. You could, if you want to think of it modally, you could think A Dorian, D Dorian, sorry, not D Dorian, going too fast, D Mixolydian, G Ionian, C Lydian, F sharp Locrian, B Phrygian, and then E Dorian. Okay, so if I'm comping here, so the one change that I'm making there is I'm putting that C to a C sharp as I get to that E Dorian. So basically, for me, at this moment, the formula for how I would execute something like SOA voicings on a minor 2-5-1 is on the 2 and the 5, I'd be using the key signature of the relative major. That's one way to think about it. Another way to think about it, which kind of I prefer, is the Phrygian of the 5. Why the Phrygian of the 5? Because I'm thinking of that whole area like a B7 sus flat 9. And then usually, like in a tonal piece for a 1 chord in a minor context, I'd be thinking about melodic minor or maybe harmonic minor. But in a modal context, because those things just don't have many voicings that are going to sound consonant, in part, and very relatedly, because they don't have many pentatonic scales inside of that mode, I'm going to transition it to the Dorian mode. Okay, and so in a minor modal context, instead of thinking about it as an E minor 6 or E minor major 7, I'm going to think about it as a regular old Dorian E minor 7. So listen again. So from a tonal perspective, like your classical music theorist is going to say this does not have a leading tone. It's not a good progression. Because we're transitioning this to a modal context, we're not expecting it to have that leading tone. And what's more important is that we have a lot of fourths that sound good together. All right, folks, that's going to be it for today's video. After doing this, I'm realizing that, wow, there's still so much to learn. But I hope that that helps thinking through some of these things. A couple takeaways I want you to have. First one, so up voicings and pentatonic voicings are very closely related. So if one doesn't sound good as a resting place, well, pentatonic voicings are always going to sound good. So if so up voicings don't sound good, swap them out for a pentatonic voicing. Second thing is this formula for minor 2-5-1s. If you want to make them sound modal, use the Phrygian of the 5, or the relative major scale for the 2 and the 5, and then the Dorian for the 1. And I think you're going to be more satisfied than trying to apply some of the traditional minor scales like melodic minor or harmonic minor. Thank you for watching. If you have watched this far, say minor success. You could spell minor however you want in the comments. And I appreciate you guys watching. See you later.